explodes, or mine does. All right, we're joined by Grayson Grundhoefer, 365 Sports, SicEm365.com. Grayson, I know you've done some stuff as well, but you know how realignment has become an everyday thing. What do you think truly, what, in your opinion, is going to be the end game for the Pac-12?
That's a great question, because I think right now we're all kind of trying to figure it out from the Big 12 side. And so it's interesting when you look on the Pac-12 side to see, okay, what realistically should be the goal of all these Pac-12 schools. And the problem, in my opinion, with the Pac-12 is that I think each school has a different goal, right? So, like, you look at Oregon State, Washington State, I mean, I think it's purely about survival, right? Trying to make sure that you're still in an upper echelon Power 5 conference. But you look at Oregon and Washington, and they're kind of thinking, wait, we want to make the most money in this conference. We want to make sure that we put ourselves in the best position to be, you know, one of the top schools in the entire country. You look at the four corners, I think they're kind of split on what they want to do as well. So in my eyes, I think that's the biggest problem, is they're all split. But I think overall, the goal would be that they come away with something that's very similar to what the Big 12 is making as far as annual revenue that is essentially guaranteed. I think that would be the ultimate goal. It just doesn't appear like they're going to get there without having to go off into some sort of crazy streaming venture, which would be, you know, unlike anything we've ever seen.
Yeah, Grayson, it just did, and now the ACC is getting antsy. I mean, it's wild times in college football. I mean, usually we could just call, you know, ask you like, hey, is there a quarterback recruit coming into campus in the next couple of months? And you'd be like, yeah, now we have to figure all this other stuff out. It's bizarre.
It really is. And you mentioned the ACC, and I got multiple questions this week, just comments on YouTube, and I think people have been just kind of wondering this is, you know, could the ACC and Pac-12 do a merger, or, you know, the Big 12 and the Pac-12 do a full merger? And everything that I read on that, it doesn't seem like it would make sense for either the Big 12 or the ACC to do that when they're in, you know, quote unquote, a position of power. And if you do that, you're just kind of watering down all the money that, you know, can be made from the schools currently in those conferences. But you're exactly right. I mean, we don't really know for sure what is going to happen, I think, right now, which makes college football extremely unpredictable, even more unpredictable than it, you know, usually is.
Grayson, since you do a phenomenal job, blanket job on the recruiting or whatever, with those who Baylor's looking at, and everyone else too, you don't just keep up with what Baylor's doing. You report a lot of what Baylor's doing. But how much has, in your opinion, the realignment shift from 2 summers ago to last summer with USC and UCLA to even the speculation going on all the time? How much is that in play when it comes to recruiting players who are active or about to commit and sign now this year?
I think it is somewhat a big deal, but I would also say, for the most part, and I think it's very important, and we do this with NIL as well, right? There's a group of prospects, you know, when you look at the top 100 prospects or something along those lines, you know, those prospects are different than the vast majority of prospects. And so, you know, to just simply talk about the top 100, does NIL matter to the top 100 players in the country? Yes. Does realignment matter to the top 100 players in the country? Probably, because most of the time the schools that have the most money to spend on it are probably in a pretty good position, whether it's in the Big Ten or the SEC currently. But after that, I think most kids honestly are looking for the program that best fits them. And so while Power 5 matters, I don't necessarily think it's fully on. It needs to be the Big Ten or the SEC. I don't think it's gotten to that point. But they definitely want to make sure that there's security in the program that they're going to, so that in 3 or 4 years, that program's not completely different than the one that's recruiting them.
Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com and 365 Sports with us early today. We'll have Chris Fanini, theathletic.com, on many things, knowledge of streaming and television and even TV and TV sports. We'll have that coming up at 3:45. Grayson, what today, or I know you always have a thread for the week of recruiting, and you have another one right now up on the pinned at near the top at the premium section. What is the number one topic this week so far, or at least in your opinion, on Baylor and recruiting in football?
Right. So for Baylor football in general, it's definitely the piece that I wrote yesterday, I guess it was, about, Kaian Roberts-Day making the shift from running back to outside linebacker, the jack position. That's definitely one of the bigger storylines. That also coincided with the probable moves of Jackie Marshall to the defensive line from the jack position as well. So those two moves kind of triggering each other a little bit. I think a lot of people are really excited about that. Kaian Roberts-Day was actually my top-rated recruit in the 2022 class, and so to see him make a move this early in his career, I think it's a big deal, because he really needed to find a spot where he gets to learn and grow at that position instead of having to move around a ton. And I also think that's important for Jackie Marshall as well. Even though the jack position does give you some of the traits you need to play defensive line, there's still going to be a little bit of a learning curve for him as well. So I would say that's probably the biggest story on the football team front. Now, as far as the recruiting front, I really think a lot of the stuff I've been talking about this week has a lot to do with the offensive line. And so we've seen Baylor take a lot of prospects in the past two classes. I think they're up to 7 commits in the 2022 and 2023 class that signed with Baylor. And then they also took the Barrington brothers. And so that's 9 prospects that they've added over the last 2 years, which means that this class is really probably going to be smaller along the offensive line, maybe similar to this last class where they only technically took 2 high school freshman recruits. I think it's going to be similar, 2 or 3, with a big emphasis on the tackle position, specifically left tackle. I really think they're trying to find a guy who could fit that left tackle mold and be a guy that they can develop and potentially be, a long-term option there, kind of like they had with Connor Galvin over the last 4 years.
Well, go ahead, Paul.
With Kaian Roberts-Day, Grayson, I mean, there's probably a line of thinking that says this is probably where they always knew he was going to wind up, but want to see if running back could be a thing, because there's not many guys that are as big as him that play that position. But do you also think that maybe because he's played a little bit there, eventually he could be the replacement for Dylan Doyle in those packages that he was running on offense?
That's a good question. And, every time that I kind of think about it, I got to think about it through the lens of, yes, he was playing running back, but he never really got on the field. He never really, I don't think, had, the opportunities to really grow at the running back position this past season. And so for that reason, I kind of, at least right now, I don't see that as being his role going forward, especially, guys, because I do think, he's already 255 pounds. And I think there's a world where he gets closer to 270 pounds in a hurry. And in fact, before he even enrolled at Baylor, he talked to me a lot about the simple fact that he was just gaining weight like crazy. And at one point, he was 280 pounds and actually had to lose some weight, quickly before he enrolled on campus. So he's just a guy that, he goes and lifts and he eats, and then it's just like, boom, the weight is there. And so it's going to be very difficult for a guy to play at 260 pounds and play running back or fullback. And Dylan Doyle was around 230. So that kind of gives you an idea of the huge difference there between the two of them weight-wise. And so, I don't see that role for him right now. I actually think it's probably more likely that he eventually moves from jack to defensive line if he continues to put on the kind of weight that he's been able to put on so far in his career.
So just to clarify, this isn't Roy Williams, who Bill Parcells used to say was a biscuit away from being a linebacker because he was a large safety. This is just natural, his body, metabolism. This is just going to be kind of what he's growing into then, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's been on a crazy diet since he got to Baylor, to the point where, it's a bunch of salads, right? You're eating a bunch of salads, and even when he was doing that, he still wasn't able to lose the weight that he wanted to. But I think that over the last, few months, he's really been able to, I think, focus on it. The training's been really good, I think, for him. And everything that I've heard is he's right around 255 pounds, which that's a pretty good number, I think, for a jack. He could even be a little bit bigger if he wanted to. But I think athleticism-wise and making sure that he's maximizing the athletic potential that he has, you want to stay around that 250 number just to stay as athletic as he is, because he's just so explosive. You want to make sure that, he keeps that explosiveness at whatever weight he is playing at. But yeah, you're exactly right. This isn't a situation where it's, horrible diet habits or anything like that. This is just more so he's got a big frame, he's got long arms, he's 6'3", and he just, he eats and he just is able to put on weight like crazy.
Thank you for your time, Grayson. Enjoy the weekend. Grayson Grundhoefer with us a little bit early today on 365 Sports from SicEm365.com. Constantly just